If I'm wearing a big green up here tonight, it's because I get to introduce these two friends of mine who also happen to be two of the finest writers in the state. We're here to celebrate the publication of Underground Christmas, John Hassler's first short story in 20 years, and Bill Holm's Faces of Christmas Past, the first printing of which sold out in 4 weeks last winter. Both of these were published by Afton Historical Society Press.
I build my essays about the life of a person, and I think of my job as a writer is to tell the stories of people who otherwise wouldn't get their stories told, and to examine that life not to find shock value in it, but to see what that life might mean and what gifts that life brought to civilization and to us as neighbors. So I often write about working class people, people who hadn't been to college, old immigrants, people who otherwise, as Neruda might say, wouldn't have their songs sung. And I did that in the Minneota book, but there was one essay I was afraid to write. John will understand this as only children. It's our mothers who made us writers. We're always the sort of pawns of powerful and affectionate mothers. So I had avoided saying anything about my mother, for fear she'd rise from the grave and disagree and correct me, I think. But I thought Christmas is a good time to write a little essay about Jona, so I did. Her name was Jónína Sigurbjörg Hermannsdóttir Josephson, Holm. Isn't that a good name? And all pronounce it? It was Jona for short. And she was a farm woman born in 1910. She was smart, she loved reading, she had terrific energy. She never went to college because if you were born in 1910 on an immigrant farm and you graduated from high school at the beginning of the Depression, you didn't go anyplace. It was amazing that she ever graduated from high school. So she married my father at the beginning of the Depression, and long before I was ever born, she decided that I would be an intellectual and die with clean hands and 10 fingers. So for that, I'm grateful. But at Christmas, peculiar things happened in our house, and this is a little character of my mother. If luck and circumstance thwarted her longing for beauty, elegance, and exciting life, she would act out that longing by inventing her own version of them wherever she was. Without having any idea of what art or taste were, she possessed, probably from birth, the equipment of an artist, a skilled hand, a sharp eye, a willingness to make mistakes, and mammoth reserves of energy. She crocheted, she knitted, she embroidered, she painted figurines and wooden plates and breadboards. She made ceramic ashtrays, lamps, bowls, casserole dishes. She glued beads and gewgaws on any recyclable object, however unlikely. She canned and baked and pickled. She collected stamps, hand-ruling the pages with a Parker fountain pen after checking her perforation gauge. She sewed dresses, shirts, coats, and when they wore thin, she adorned them with decorative patches and then patches on top of the patches. Whatever interested her at any given moment, she surrendered to in excess. Without ever having heard of William Blake, she practiced his maxim by instinct. The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. When wooden plates captured her attention, she painted 50 for relatives, 50 for neighbors and friends, 50 to sell, though mostly she gave them away, and another 50 for storage under the bed, just in case. Not only was her enthusiasm contagious, she owned no resistance to the enthusiasms of others. If a neighbor learned from the radio or a crafts magazine how to make pink swan soap dishes out of plastic dish soap bottles, Jona swung into action and tried a few hundred herself. None of her projects, however, intruded into the time she spent on her real passion, human beings, creatures capable of language and conversation, the telling of stories. She entered her room talking, eyed the company to see who might need cheering up, finishing the sentence when she closed the door behind her. When she died, one of her friends, amazed that death had been tough or fast enough to do Iona in, sighed and said she had only two speeds, high and off. Her house became the gallery for her projects, and at Christmas, her favorite season, the show doubled or tripled in size to overwhelm the cramped little farmstead. Out came the boxes of handmade tree ornaments, the painted figurines of Santa and his whole retinue, reindeer, elves, sleighs, a set of wise men and camels, and an electrified manger scene with blinking lights, angels of various color and design, dishes and bowls decorated with poinsettias and mistletoe, the embroidered Christmas tablecloth and napkins, the rose-mouthed napkin rings, wooden plates painted with Christmas motifs and Yuletide greetings in 4 or 5 languages, Christmas bric-a-brac on every flat surface, handmade candle holders of maybe 15 designs with scented candles burning nightly for a month, their smells of lavender sachet, pine forest, and spicy cinnamon oozing together in the drafty rooms. And finally, my favorites, the Christmas angels, made from folded Reader's Digests. Shellacked and spray painted to a board-like stiffness. And the pièce de résistance, the Christmas toilet seat cover, with a gay red winking Santa Claus waiting for your hind end. And it was a house of gauds, no subtle earth tones or delicate pastels for Iona. She loved bright, intense gypsy color, red, hot pink, purple, orange, gold, lime green. These wise men had style. These angels played tambourines, not ethereal harps. In a bleak old farmhouse on the bleak north crest of a bleak hill on the bleak prairie with the bleakest climate on the continent, this house, inhabited by Scandinavian Lutherans, looked like a Hungarian restaurant, decorated for a Chinese wedding. My mother cared little for the theology of Christmas. She was at best a nominal Lutheran, faithful to Ladies' Aid and do-good projects, but casual in her piety. Her Christmas music consisted of breathy performances of Heim Symbol, Heim Symbol, Silent Night in Icelandic, and Jingle Bells on a Hohner harmonica, and this only after a well-laced Tom and Jerry or two. Do they still drink Tom and Jerry's in Duluth? God, that's why I learned to drink, was they'd give me Tom and Jerry batter and then I'd sneak into the kitchen and lace them with the old man's bourbon. She loved the festivity of Christmas, the chance to create some light and noise and gaiety at the bottom of the year's darkness, cold and silence. If you had to live in this God-forsaken place, at least show some evidence of being actually alive. Maybe that's the real kernel of psychological wisdom underlying the Christmas rites anyway. Iona's extroverted nature guided her to stumble into that wisdom unconsciously.
Charlie, don't quit now. I have to swallow twice trying to wring the anguish out of my voice. In 6 months, you'll be ordained. I don't feel much like being ordained this year, maybe another year. What I feel like doing is going out and getting my hands dirty out in the workaday world. Charlie, you're out of your mind. He smiles. How can I counsel people if I don't know the first thing about real life on the outside? Jay, do you realize I've been in boarding school since the 9th grade? I'm so well grounded in philosophy that for my leisure reading I pick up Wittgenstein and Nietzsche instead of the Sunday funnies. I'm a weirdo is what I am, Jay, just a downright egg-headed weirdo. I keep a lid on my anger. Charlie, don't do something you'll be sorry for. What do I know about driving the freeway? Do you realize I haven't driven a car since 2 years ago last summer? What do I know about making money? I'm going to start in the new year by finding myself a job. Doing what, I demand? I don't know. My education sure is worthless on the outside. As a layman, I could do parish work, but that doesn't pay diddly. I need to make lots of money. You do? Of course I do. If I don't go out there with the idea of being successful in the way the world understands success, I'm not going to learn very much, am I? I don't intend to stand off to the side of life. I intend to be in the mainstream. I'm losing my best friend just as I lost my wife, and I'm devastated. The difference is, this time I'm not speechless. I begin with my voice lowered. I've heard all this before, Charlie. It's a widespread belief these days that in order to minister to people, you have to adopt their ways. Sounds perfectly logical, but I never believed it. I call it the quicksand principle. I've never believed you can pull somebody out of the quicksand by jumping in yourself. Jay, I need to be in the mainstream, he repeats as though he hasn't heard a word I uttered. What do I know about having to go shopping in those awful shopping centers in the evening after putting in a full day's work at a job I hate? What do I know? Listen to me, you dope. You don't need to know that stuff. If you leave now, you'll never come back. I'm certain of that. You'll never be a priest. You're a little too earnest when you talk about money. Your eyes glow with desire when you mention the shopping centers you pretend to despise. My rising voice causes him to look worried. Jay, take it easy. I'm prepared to make some mistakes. But you're not prepared to correct them. I see that plain as day. Within a year, you'll be married. How do you correct that? Who'd want to? Don't interrupt me. And before you know it, you'll have 4 kids and a string of car washes from Chicago to Evanston called Charlie's Wash and Wax. You'll be famous for your placards nailed to the walls with quotations from Nietzsche and Wittgenstein. You'll be the car wash king of northern Illinois and parts of Wisconsin. Charlie laughs. Instead of making him see the light, I'm making him laugh, which makes me boil over. I pound the table, shouting, I see a gigantic billboard as you go north out of the city. It's your goddamn car wash billboard, and it shows Big Bird saying, I wash, therefore I am. I get up to leave the room, leave him sitting there, his elbows on the table, his face buried in his handkerchief, his shoulders shaking with silent laughter. But no, he isn't laughing. As I step away from the table, he removes his handkerchief, looks after me with tears in his eyes. I feel terrible. Climbing the stairs, I'm already planning my apology. I had no business lecturing him on what courses life should take. What's come over me? I never used to be so meddlesome, so selfish. I've got to stop flying off the handle, or I'm liable to wind up in the state hospital with my son Bob. And Thomas Merton agrees with me. In my room, I open the book to this. Without silence, our language is meaningless, the silence between word and word, between utterance and utterance. That's most of part 2 of the story. It takes place in the basement of the seminary. This started out as a memoir because I was invited by Afton Press to write a memoir for Christmas. I started writing about when I went to St. John's and was invited into the root cellar for a beer party. And then it all came together as a short story, and so it turned into fiction. I couldn't help it. Part of it is autobiographical, obviously. The party in the root cellar is autobiographical. And the most important secondary character in here, besides Jay, is his son Bob, who's in treatment. And it's part 3 when he goes north to Rookery to the state hospital. He visits his son and finds his son is recovering very nicely, but turning into a person he didn't know. He's a stranger to him. And it's kind of a grim story for Christmas, and yet I think it has a rather upbeat ending. I hope so anyway. Hope you see it that way. It's been my first short story, as Bart said, in 20 years. I started out writing short stories in 1970. I wrote about 25 stories over the first 5 years, practicing how to write fiction. And then I decided to try the novel. I wrote Staggerford and 4 Miles to Pinecone and never looked back. And then I wrote this short story. It's been fun. I might try another. I thought I'd forgotten how, but this seems to work. Those early stories, incidentally, are mostly sitting in my filing cabinet. I haven't looked at them since I wrote them. I remember the first day I started to write. I was 37 years old, woke up one morning, and a voice in my head said, half your life is over, Hassler, you better get started. And I went to college with a notebook and a pen, and I went in the library after my 8 o'clock class, and I started writing a story. It was called A Story Worth Hearing. It was about 4 old men sitting on a bench in front of the post office in this little town, much like Plainview, where I watched these 4 old men on this bench over the years. And I never knew what they were saying, but I made up in the story that they were talking about a girlfriend of one of the old men from years past. And they talked about her without realizing that she was married to the man on the other end of the bench. I don't know if that story is worth hearing, but I haven't looked at it since. I should go home and look at it. It sounds interesting now I talk about it. I wrote for 5 years on those short stories, and then I felt myself ready to settle into the novel, and then that's where I discovered what I was born to do. I found that it was fit my temperament, everything about it. I love working for 2 years without feedback, and then perfecting something, and then showing it to somebody and seeing how it works. That's more my style. So I've been writing novels ever since, working hard at that. But this short story entices me back to the short story, so I'm interested. I'm looking through my journal for other things now that I might base short stories on.
And then I'll read you a little Icelandic ghost story. See, in an essay you can throw in anything. The kitchen sink. Well, I got to the end of the character of Yona and I thought, Pat wanted 10,000 words and I'm only at 6. What next? I did. And I thought, well, Yona was an Icelander. I mentioned Iceland. We'll throw in some stuff about Iceland. And I loved Icelandic ghost stories. There's a great tradition of them. There may be 100 of them. But the wonderful ones all take place on Christmas Eve. And of course, so do English ghost stories, like Christmas Carol. But our English ghost stories are rather sentimental. But the Icelandic ones are tough. Christmas is tough in the Arctic. So this is an Icelandic ghost story. And it also has a little piece of useful information in it. It's probably no surprise that the best Icelandic ghost stories I heard take place on Christmas Eve. The deacon of Myrká, the dark church, arranges to pick up his girlfriend, Gudrun. Now can you try saying that after me. Gudrun. Gudrun? Just try it. This comes up later. The deacon arranges to pick up his girlfriend, Gudrun, a hired girl on a neighborhood farm, on his gray horse, Foxy, to ride to Christmas vespers. But since the deacon has drowned in a glacial river a few days before, he's a little late picking up Gudrun, and he doesn't say very much. With an icy hand, he hoists her brusquely onto Foxy and rides off with her through the frozen valley. The moon scuds through a cloud-strewn sky, sometimes giving off a little light. When Foxy plunges down a steep bank to ford a river, the deacon's hat lifts slightly. As the moon drifts from under a cloud, Gudrun sees the bare skull. The deacon croons to her, "The moon is gliding, death is riding. See the white fleck at the back of my neck. Garun, Garun." Having joined the undead, the deacon can no longer pronounce Gudrun's name, since the first 3 letters spell the Icelandic name of God. Now check your neighbors here. You don't want to be in a room with zombies, or if so, when we take a break, you may want to move toward the door. So just ask your neighbors to pronounce Gudrun. If not, move the chair. Gudrun is terrified, but what can she do? The horse gallops wildly to the church gate. In the churchyard, Gudrun sees an open grave, surrounded by a pile of freshly dug dirt. The deacon leaps from Foxy's back and grabs Gudrun's riding cloak in his bony grip. But she had left home in such a hurry that she'd put only one arm in her cloak. Clutching the empty cloak, the deacon leaps into the open grave, while the piles of heaped dirt scamper down into the hole to cover him. The pastor came later to sing psalms for the shaken Gudrun, but as the story reports, she was never quite the same afterwards. A sorcerer had to be summoned to cast spells and roll a boulder over the deacon's grave to keep his ghost quiet. Merry Christmas, Gleðileg Jól.
The memoir, it's finished, all but finished now. I'm printing it up at home. It's taken the longest of any book I've written, 2.5 years or more, and it's the shortest book. It takes me only up to age 18. I think it's taken so long because my life doesn't have a story to pull it ahead, you know, the way a novel does. My life is episodic, the way yours is. So I wake up in the morning, I think of a new episode to add, I go back and I start adding other things, I start revising, I change. I can't keep my hands off this book. Maybe I love it too much, let it go. It contains only 7 chapters. One chapter is called Movies. At the beginning of each chapter, I have this old-fashioned business about, used to see it in old-fashioned books in which it would tell you what the chapter was about, movies, in which the author recalls his movie-going habits from the days when the movements on the screen seemed as personal as his dreams, a chapter ending as it began, in tears. So I'll read you the beginning and the ending of this chapter from my memoirs. Heidi. My mother's 16-year-old cousin Bunny, who came from Helena, Montana to live with us in our village in northern Minnesota, takes me to the Saturday matinee with her high school friends. I'm 4. It's tragic enough that Shirley Temple should be separated from her kindly grandfather, but when grandfather looks into his crystal ball, sees her face, I can't stand it. I assume she's trapped inside that globe of glass. I weep and I wail. Bunny has to leave the movie and walk me the 6 blocks home and hurries back to see the ending. To this day, I'm 65. The image still gives me the willies. Bunny at 77 clearly remembers her disgust. Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. My parents take me to this one. I'm still 4. The moment the warty-nosed witch appears on the screen with a poison apple, I begin to wailing so loud I have to carry me out and take me home. Gulliver's Travels. My parents drive me 17 miles to see this picture at the Cozy Theater in Wadena. I'm now nearly 6. I'm okay until Gulliver is lashed to the ground and walked on by a bunch of creepy little people. I weep. My father takes me to the lobby, tells me to wait there, and returns to his seat. I stand facing the street now and then, gathering enough courage to turn and peek at the screen. Pinocchio. I'm fine until Pinocchio gets swallowed by the whale. I can't look. I sob and I sob. Scram, says my ordinarily long-suffering father. I slink out to the lobby. Except for the unwatchable parts, I see the rest of the movie standing in the doorway with the usher. Dumbo. The Orpheum Theater, Minneapolis, 1943. Perhaps the first movie I permit myself to enjoy from beginning to end. Paragraph out of my old Christmas essay called Chocolate Chip Cookies for Your Enemies, in which I describe my favorite hymn. I also describe lutefisk in this, but we haven't eaten yet, so I won't describe that. But we all love Christmas songs, and this was my favorite. My favorite carol as a boy was Angels We Have Heard on High. Angels we have heard on high, singing sweetly o'er the plains, and the mountains in reply, echoing their glad refrains. Gloria in excelsis Deo, Gloria in excelsis Deo. It was French. It was operatic. It was half in Latin, just like the Catholics. It was not dour, slow, and full of blood and lamenting. Rather, it was full of angels singing shepherds' jubilee and light. Even the mountains, in reply, echoing back their brave delight. And the chorus was not the standard Lutheran one note to one syllable sensible plodding, but a glorious melisma of runs on the word Gloria, which sounded up through Scandinavian throats, not as a word at all, but as a simple ah, a singing for the act of singing alone, for the quivering in your own throat, for the air moving up in a great column through your body, from stomach to diaphragm to chest to throat to the bones of your face and out into the cold, blustery Minnesota night, like a tropical flower that said to hell with you all and bloomed in a snowdrift, filling the air not with chaste frost, but with heavy sensual perfume of bodies with black hair and black eyes and heads thrown back and scales rolling out with no words at all, only the ah of joy
pleasure, delight. Now that was a hymn. But I was never so sure of the God's name who was there praised as the minister seemed to be. The God that had that Gloria coming did not worry about crummy presents or getting ahead. That God was not so afraid of the machines going away that he trembled in the presence of the poor. That God threw open his mouth without squeamishness and let sound come out into the universe. The inward noise of that singing and those images of poverty in a cow barn without shame or ambition helped carry me through childhood with their power. Metaphors do that, understood right.
John, what the ultimate Catholic carol was, we Lutherans have to get advice on this sort of thing. And Rich and both agreed that it's a silent night, probably sung in German and stirred scholarly. So if you know it in German, sing it in German. If you know Holm and Bull in Icelandic, sing it in Icelandic. If you know it in English, sing it in English. And if, like me, you are frequently reduced to la, 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 Merry Christmas.